Hi there. So, we talked about some great ways to learn English effectively last time. But there's so much more to cover. What do you think is another important aspect?
Well, I believe consistency is key. It's not just about studying hard for a few days and then giving up. You need to make it a daily habit.
Absolutely. I know some people who try to cram a lot of learning into one day and then don't do anything for a week. That's not going to work. How do you suggest we make it a daily habit?
Maybe set aside a specific time each day, like right after breakfast or before going to bed. It doesn't have to be a long time. Even 15-20 minutes of focused study can be really beneficial.
That's a good idea. I find that if I don't schedule it, something else always comes up. And what about the content of our daily study? Should it be the same every day?
I don't think so. Variety keeps it interesting. One day you could focus on grammar, another on vocabulary, and then on listening comprehension. For example, on grammar days, you can work through some exercises in a grammar book.
I agree. I sometimes get bored when I do the same thing over and over again. But grammar can be really tricky. How do you make sure you're learning it correctly?
Well, using reliable grammar resources is crucial. There are some great grammar books out there, like A Comprehensive English Grammar. Also, online grammar courses can be really helpful. They often have interactive exercises and explanations.
I've heard of those. But I'm not sure if I should start with a basic or an advanced course. What do you think?
It depends on your current level. If you're a beginner, start with the basics. But if you already have a good foundation, you can jump into more advanced topics. You can always take a placement test online to figure out where you stand.
That's a smart idea. And what about vocabulary? It seems like there are just so many words to learn.
True, but you can break it down. Instead of trying to learn a huge list all at once, focus on words related to specific topics. For instance, if you're interested in cooking, learn cooking. Related vocabulary.
That makes sense. It would be more practical too. And do you think flashcards are still a good way to learn vocabulary?
Definitely. You can make your own flashcards with a word on one side and the definition, example sentence, and pronunciation on the other. There are also some great apps that can help you create and study digital flashcards.
I've used some of those apps. They're really convenient. But I find it hard to remember all the words. Any tips on that?
Try to use the new words in your daily conversations, even if it's just in your head at first. Also, review the flashcards regularly. Spaced repetition is a great technique. You review the cards at increasing intervals, like every day for the first week, then every 3 days, then once a week.
I'll give that a try. Now let's talk about listening. How can we improve our listening skills?
Listening to English podcasts, movies, and TV shows is a great start. You can start with subtitles in your native language to understand the context, and then gradually switch to English subtitles, and finally, no subtitles at all.
I love watching movies in English, but sometimes it's still hard to catch everything.
That's normal. You can pause the movie or rewind it to listen again. Also, try to focus on the main ideas first and then pick up on the details. And don't just passively listen, actively engage with what you're hearing.
What do you mean by actively engage?
Well, for example, after watching an episode of a TV show, try to summarize what happened in your own words, or discuss it with a friend who's also learning English.
That sounds like a good way to make the most of the listening material. And what about speaking? How can we practice speaking when we don't have an English speaking partner around?
You can record yourself speaking. Talk about your day, your hobbies, or a topic you're interested in. Then listen to the recording and see where you need to improve. You can also join online English speaking communities and have conversations with people from all over the world.
That's a creative solution. I'm a bit shy about recording myself, but I know it can be really helpful. And what about pronunciation? How do we improve that?
Listen to native speakers carefully and try to imitate their pronunciation. Pay attention to things like intonation, stress, and rhythm. There are also pronunciation apps that can give you feedback on your pronunciation.
I've noticed that different regions have different accents. Which accent should we try to imitate?
It depends on your preference. If you plan to travel to a particular country, it might be beneficial to learn the accent of that region. But generally, standard British or American English accents are widely understood. You can choose the one you like the sound of better.
That makes sense. And what about reading? How does reading help in learning English?
Reading improves your vocabulary, grammar, and comprehension skills. You can start with simple books or articles in English and gradually move on to more complex ones. It also exposes you to different writing styles.
I like reading, but sometimes I get stuck on difficult words. Should I look them up right away?
It depends. If the word seems really important to understand in the sentence, then look it up. But if you can get the general meaning without it, try to guess the meaning from the context. This will help you develop your reading skills.
Okay, that's good advice. And what about writing? How can we improve our writing skills?
Start by writing regularly. It could be a journal entry, a short story, or an opinion piece. Then, you can ask a native speaker or a more advanced English learner to review your writing and give you feedback.
That sounds like a lot of work, but I know it's necessary. Are there any specific writing exercises we can do?
Yes! You can do things like sentence transformation exercises where you change a simple sentence into a more complex one. Also, try to write different types of text, like letters, emails, and essays.
I'll give those a try. Another thing I'm curious about is how to learn English idioms and phrasal verbs. They seem so difficult.
They can be challenging, but you can learn them in context. When you're reading or listening, pay attention to how idioms and phrasal verbs are used. Write them down and try to use them in your own sentences.
That's a good approach. I always get confused when I hear native speakers using them.
It takes time, but with practice, you'll start to understand and use them more naturally. Also, there are some books and websites dedicated to teaching English idioms and phrasal verbs.
That's good to know. Now, let's talk about the role of culture in learning English. Do you think it's important?
Absolutely! Understanding the culture of English, speaking countries helps you understand the language better. It gives you context for the words and expressions used. For example, if you know about American Thanksgiving, you'll understand the related vocabulary and traditions better.
I agree. But how can we learn about the culture while learning the language?
Watch movies and TV shows that showcase the culture, read books about the history and traditions of English, speak in countries, and try to interact with people from those cultures. You can even participate in online cultural exchange programs.
That sounds interesting. I'll look into some of those. And what about using English in real life situations? How can we make that happen?
If you live in an English-speaking country, it's easier. But if not, you can look for English. Speaking events in your area like language meet, AUPs, or cultural festivals. You can also volunteer for international organizations where you might have the opportunity to use English.
That's a great idea. I'll see if there are any such events in my city. And finally, do you have any tips for staying motivated while learning English?
Set realistic goals for yourself. It could be something like being able to hold a 10-minute conversation in English by the end of the month. Celebrate your achievements along the way, no matter how small. Also, find a study buddy or join a study group. Having someone to learn with can keep you motivated.
That's excellent advice. Learning English is a long-term journey, but with the right strategies, it can be really rewarding.
Definitely. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes when learning a new language. It's all part of the process.
True. Well, this has been a really productive conversation. I'm sure our listeners will find these tips useful.
I hope so too. Let's keep sharing more effective ways to learn English in our future podcasts.